Well, hey everyone. This is Jonathan from Mr. Pearson Talks Books. I'm an elementary school teacher who wants to help teachers and parents connect with great books for their kids. Now, we are concluding the month of March, which means we are also coming to the end of middle grade March, which was this month-long read-along where people were encouraged to read middle grade books, and there were 5 prompts that went along with it. And those reading prompts were a book by an author who has 3 names, a book with a flower on the cover, a book from a series, a book that has something to do with travel, and a book from the 1900s. It still hurts me to say that one. Now, I made a video at the beginning of the month where I said these are going to be the books that I'm going to read for each one of these prompts. And those books were Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz, The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling, When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead, and Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary. And I have a confession to make. I only read 2 of those books. Of that whole list, I only made it through 2. Now, one of them, Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz, I picked it up and started it and just wasn't feeling it at the time. Not to say it's a bad book. I don't know. I didn't read it, but I just didn't read it right now. But what I actually did do is I did continue reading middle grade because that's what this channel is. It's my favorite thing to read is middle grade fiction. And I ended up reading 13 books, or read or listened to 13 books in the month of March, 11 of those being middle grade fiction. So instead of those original 5 that I listed, here are the books that I did end up reading or listening to over the course of the month. I started off with a book called We Dream of Space by Erin Entrada Kelly, and it's about 3 kids who are growing up in the United States in 1986, January 1986, to be more specific. And if you know history, you know there was a great tragedy that happened in January of 1986 when the Challenger shuttle exploded. I was in the 1st or 2nd grade at that time, and I clearly remember that being a big thing. And so this story is about 3 kids who are going to school, and one of their teachers tried to be an astronaut on the Challenger shuttle, didn't quite make it, but spends the whole time building and creating her curriculum around the Challenger shuttle. And so when the shuttle explodes, there's a great deal of tragedy. It's a phenomenal book. It was actually a Newbery Honor winner when it came out. I did read Ramona the Pest. I love that book, Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary. It is one that is near and dear to my heart. I have read it multiple times over the years. I've read it to students. I've read it with my own kids, and I just love that book. And then I'm working my way through the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine. I made a video that was posted earlier about what I thought of the first 4. And so I read Monster Blood by R.L. Stine. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen my other video, I did not like Monster Blood. It was not for me. Then there was a new release that came out. It was called Max in the Land of Lies by Adam Gidwitz. I did read that one. It is the sequel to Max in the House of Spies, and it's about a young Jewish boy during World War II who, after he's trained to be a spy by the British Army, he then is sent into Germany to infiltrate and try to help to bring down and gather information about the Nazi Party. It was a really touching and wonderful book. It's hard to say something is wonderful when it's about such a dark period in history, particularly World War II and the Nazi Party and the things that were done to the Jewish people. But the author treats the subject matter with respect. He treats all of the characters, with maybe the exception of some of the Nazi leaders. He treats all of them with respect as well. Just a really great book. That one, I do want to give teachers and parents, that one's probably more geared toward 5th grade and higher. Some of the subject matter, some of the things that it touches on might be more appropriate for 5th grade students, 6th grade students, and so on. I then read another Goosebumps called Say Cheese and Die, which one was, this one was a little scarier. It's not one of my favorites that I've read so far, but it was interesting, about a haunted camera. Then a book that I read, this one fits from the 1900s because this book was written in the 1960s. It's a book called The Pushcart War by Gene Merrill. And it is about a war that takes place between truck drivers in New York City and pushcart peddlers, and all of the ins and outs that go on with the events that take place when a pushcart is run over by a 18-wheel truck, and the retaliation and all of the different things that take place. It is a very interesting book. This one also I would recommend probably fourth grade and higher. It might be a little bit mature for third grade students. But it is an interesting book, particularly for that time period. I also read the follow-up to Ramona the Pest. I read Ramona the Brave. This is where Ramona has moved on from kindergarten. She now has to learn to adapt to first grade life, as well as getting her own room and the things that come along with that. After that one, I read, I'm a fan of Brandon Mull. I've been reading through the Fablehaven series, hoping to get to book 4 here shortly. But I saw that he has a book about 2 of the characters. If you are familiar with Fablehaven, you know there are 2 humorous characters, the Satyrs, who are Newell and Doran. And Newell and Doran discover that there is something on the Fablehaven Reserve that is turning creatures, including their 2 best friends, to stone. And turns out it's a Gorgon. And so they go on a mission, on an adventure, to try to figure out how to stop the Gorgon. Now, it wasn't my favorite Brandon Mull that I've read, but it was a very enjoyable book. So if you like Fablehaven, if you like those characters, now Kendra and Seth, thankfully there was no Seth in this book, but the 2 kids from the original series aren't in this one. The grandfather is, he shows up, but it was a fun book to read through. I also read, and this was probably one of my favorites that I read this month. These next 3 actually are my favorites that I read this month. Moon Garden by Michelle Berry. This was a science fiction retelling of The Secret Garden. And it's about this girl who, she goes to a school for, in the future, they have magic. So there are some people who have electronic magic. She is supposed to have number magic. And she's struggling with the fact that she doesn't. And then one night she's wandering around the school, feeling left out because she didn't have any friends. And she stumbles across a hidden room with a robot. And there are plants growing in this hidden room. Now, the mystery behind that is that plants are the reason that she's on the moon, because back hundreds of years ago, the plants became toxic and forced everyone to leave planet Earth, what they call the old world. And she discovers that she has magic for plants. And so there's a mystery as to where the garden came from, who is responsible for it, and then what happens when people find out that the garden is there. It is the first of a trilogy, and the book ends on a cliffhanger. So I am very much looking forward to reading the next one, called Sea Garden. The great thing about this is it was one of the middle grade March read-alongs for this month. And then I went into school, and one of my students actually had the book Moon Garden. She was very excited about it, and she's reading through the entire series. So I'm looking forward to having conversations with her about that. And then I read When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. If you're on this channel, you know that this is my absolute favorite book. It's about a girl named Mira growing up in New York City, and she starts to discover some mysterious notes that seem to be able to tell things that are going to happen in the future. She's also dealing with losing her best friend and making a new best friend, and there's a kind of a guy who yells and kicks and screams. Nobody really understands what he's doing until the end, when it all ties together. And I got to tell you, I've read this book probably 15, 16 times. And that's not a hyperbole. That's not an exaggeration. I really do like this book. Read it to my students every year. Every single time when I get to that part, and if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. When I get to that part, I have to stop and catch my breath and wipe my eyes, because I'm going to cry every single time. And then finally, I finished the month out with a book called The Book Wanderers by Anna James. And this is about a girl named Tilly who lives with her grandparents, and they run a bookstore called Pages & Co. And one day she discovers that she can see some of the characters in the book, and just comes to find out that she has this ability called book wandering, where she can actually go into particular books and visit as long as she doesn't change the story. On top of that, there's a mystery as to what happened to her mother, because one day her mother left and never returned, and they have no clues as to what happened to her or where she went. And Tilly meets a friend named Oscar who also realizes he has this power. This is actually the first book in a set of 6. So I will definitely be reading through the other ones in the coming months, and hopefully before the end of the year be able to talk back to you about them. So those are the 11 middle grade books that I read this month, read or listened to. I have a fairly significant commute each day, so I'm able to listen to quite a few audiobooks each month. But I also read The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. It's an adult fantasy, kind of a Norse mythology type thing. And then there was a new Star Wars book that came out. I am a big Star Wars fan, called The Mask of Fear. It was by Alexander Freed. And this one focused primarily on Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and what they're doing in the aftermath of Order 66 and the Emperor taking over and declaring that it's an empire. I realize that's kind of niche. If you're not into Star Wars, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So while I may have strayed from my original plan, I still did get some middle grade reading done, because I love reading middle grade books so that I can encourage my students, I can encourage people through these videos to check these books out. They're great books. I am still working my way through the Harry Potter series. I am on Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Hopefully I'm going to get to it soon. It is, they start to get longer at this point, so it takes a little bit longer to get through them. And the Mysterious Benedict Society is still sitting up on my shelf. Planning to read that one as well. They were just a bit too long for the month of March. That is my monthly recap for the month of March. I'd love to hear what you read. I'd love to know if you've read any of the books that I shared about and what your thoughts are on them. And I would love to know if you've seen any of your students. If you're a teacher, have you seen any of your students reading these books? Or was there one that you are planning to recommend to your students going forward? But again, my name is Jonathan. This is Mr. Pearson Talks Books. We'll see you in the next video.